Hello, this is Dennis Tucker, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Book, Chapter, and Verse. This program is being brought to you by the Westside Church of Christ. Our desire during this time is to really just study from the Bible, to see what it says and how it relates to us today. We have been going through a series of lessons dealing with Genesis, pointing out that many of the basic facts of the Bible and principles laid out in Genesis are carried through the rest of the Bible. For instance, that sin brings about death and destruction. That we see when Adam and Eve sinned against God, they were cast out from the presence of God, and that from that time onward, sin has been a problem to mankind. And also we point out the first time something happens, there tends to be a great significance to that. And the first sin, for instance, a great significance attached to it in Genesis 3rd chapter. Though we had the first brothers and the first marriage. But what we want to do, and what we have done in the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about the Genesis flood. And the first lesson, what we dealt with, was the fact of the flood being universal. The Bible in various passages, as you read through Genesis 6th, 7th, 8th, and even 9th chapter, it points out that all of the land was covered with water, that all that was upon the land was destroyed, including all the people and all the animals that lived upon the earth was destroyed. And that is an answer somewhat to the argument that the flood was regional in scope, that only covered a certain portion of the world. The Bible honestly says it was worldwide. Now last week what we dealt with was Noah being a preacher of righteousness. As we mentioned, Noah was saved by grace. In Genesis 6 verse 8, it points out to us, for by grace Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And so there was grace involved in Noah's salvation. But also, as Hebrews 11 chapter verse 7 says, that there was also faith. And that is by faith Noah believed and then built the ark. And that gets us to the other thing, and that is there had to be obedience on Noah's part. It wasn't enough just to have God to reveal the flood that was coming to Noah. It wasn't enough just to believe what God said, but Noah had to do all that God said to do in the preparation of the ark, of building the ark, of getting the animals inside, and actually he and his family get inside the ark also. But what we want to do at this time is continue on with our study and probably think about this in one particular area as far as right after the flood. You would think that after Noah and his family got to see the destruction of the world, as they saw all their relatives, all their loved ones dying in the flood, except for Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their wives, they would think that they would have learned a lesson, that sin is bad and you do not sin against God. And yet, as you look through the Bible, we find that sin has always been a problem in mankind. Over in Romans, the 3rd chapter, verse 23, the Apostle Paul, as he describes the Jews and Gentiles in chapter 1, he points out all the sins that the Gentiles had committed as they turned their back on God and started worshiping the creature rather than the Creator. And he describes in that first chapter of Romans this downward spiral of going from bad to worse. And then in the 2nd chapter of Romans, that Paul then describes the Jews. And that he pointed out they were no better than the Gentiles, and that they had the law, but they did not keep the law. They transgressed the law of God, so they were under sin. And so in time you get to the 3rd chapter of Romans, what Paul does is he wraps everybody together. Jews and Gentiles, black and white, rich and poor, no matter what nationality you may have been. And he pointed out in Romans, the 3rd chapter, verse 9, he says, what then? Are we better than they? Not at all. For we have previously charged both Jews and Greeks that they are all under sin. And then he go on, verse 10 on down, he explains what he means somewhat there, when he said, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks after God. They have all gone out of their way. They have together become unprofitable. There is none who does good, no, not one. And so he just describes the sins of the people there when he says their throat is an open tomb, with the tongues they have practiced deceit, the poison of asp is under their lips. And so they sinned against God and against their fellow men with what they were saying. Whose mouths is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. And just keep in mind, he's not trying to describe just one set of people. He's saying that everybody has transgressed the law of God. And so by the time you get to Romans 3 verse 23, there he said, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so that's the theme throughout the Bible. We see that with the case of Noah. And that is right after the flood, Noah and his family come out of the ark, and there's this covenant that is made with God and Noah's family. They offer sacrifices to God, and then God explains the rainbow that this was a covenant, or a sign of the covenant. They would never again destroy the world from flood. And you would think, okay, coming out of the ark, that they would be great. I mean, just everything would be just as it's supposed to be. However, almost immediately in Genesis, the 9th chapter, we are described what happened as far as Noah in his life. And verse 20 said, Noah became a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine, and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, went backward, and covered their nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away. They did not see their father's nakedness. And what we have here is the sin in particular of drunkenness. And that's what I want to talk about with you in our program today, really. And we want to talk about drunkenness in the life of Noah, and also what the Bible says about drinking, about alcohol in our lives today. And as you look at this here, a lot of times people ask the question, is it okay to drink as long as I don't get drunk? And we have to realize that in our society today, drinking is really advertised, as promoted. You turn on the television and you'll see all kinds of commercials dealing with alcohol. Some of them are very funny. I mean, a lot of times the beer commercials are some of the funniest commercials on television, where they're talking about talking frogs, where you're talking about guys saying, "What's up?" and type of commercial. Or whether you're talking about other commercials that tend to be just kind of funny commercials that make you laugh and appreciate, and maybe some of the humor involved. Some of the commercials are very poetic, that they are very pretty type commercials, very touching, heart-touching type commercials. And they may center around beer, but also family time together and loving one another's families. And even some commercials are telling us that we need to drink responsibly. We need to make sure we don't get out there and hurt other people with our drinking. And so there's all kinds of commercials that are ultimately trying to tell us it's okay to drink as long as you don't get drunk. And as we look in the Bible, we find that we have to keep in mind that here was the case of Noah getting drunk. And that is, we have to realize that drunkenness is the end product of drinking. Now, I'm not saying when a person takes their first drink that they are automatically drunk. But what we do have to realize that if you keep on drinking, that is what's going to happen. You are going to get drunk. Now, sometimes people, as they go out, that they're not intending to get drunk. There's maybe social drinking, just a little bit in their mind. And they go across that line, they keep on drinking and then get drunk. Other people, as they start, that's their intention. That's from the very beginning. That I'm sure you've heard people on Friday night or Saturday night make the comment that they don't go out and they're intending to get drunk. They want to get stone-faced drunk. And that is what they're aiming for in their life or at that occasion. And as you look at the Bible, we find that it says that, first of all, drunkenness is sin, but also drinking clouds our judgment. It hinders our ability to think clearly. Over in 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, in New Testament, 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, in verse 6, and talking about the life we are to live before God. And I realize that we're talking about Christians. We're talking about people that realize they're staying before God and are going to give an account of how they live on a day-by-day basis before Him. And so in verse 6 he says, "Therefore do not let us sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober." The definition of soberness is basically being alert, being sober-minded, serious-minded, of having your facilities, of being able to make clear decisions in your mind. And see, drunkenness or drinking at all really hinders our ability to think clearly. It hinders our ability to understand sometimes consequences of our actions, or really what we're doing. And we wouldn't normally do things or say things a lot of times because we are under the influence of this drug, of alcohol. And alcohol is a drug. It is a drug. As you look at this here, we see that it basically leads to things. Here in the case of Noah, it led to nakedness, as talked about in this passage. And as you look, we see that it can lead to other sins. In fact, there was a song a few years ago by Brad Paisley that's called "Alcohol." And it's a humorous song that when you hear it on the radio, it is sung as a humorous song, but a lot of times the words of songs, even ones that are humorous, has a lot of truth in them. And I just want to read to you some of the words of the song, again, Alcohol by Brad Paisley. It's like, I can make anybody pretty, I can make you believe any lie. Now, first of all, the idea, of course, that as you're drinking, that the person across from you, that maybe the young man over there or the young woman over there, they normally wouldn't give them a time of day, but all of a sudden they're starting to look a little bit better to you because, again, your senses are being dulled somewhat by the alcohol. And not only that, but also you'll start believing anything you hear. Is that it can make you pick a fight with somebody twice your size. Well, I've been known to cause few breakups, and I've been known to cause few births. Well, it can make you new friends or get you fired from work. And since the day I left Milwaukee, Luxembourg and Bordeaux, France, been making the bars lots of big money and helping white people dance. I got you in trouble in high school because, now that was a ball. You had some of the best times you'll never remember with me, alcohol. I got blamed at your wedding reception for your best man's embarrassing speech and also for those naked pictures of you at the beach. I've influenced kings and world leaders. I helped Hemingway write like he did. And I'll bet you after a drink or two, I can make you put that lampshade on your head. Because since the day I left Milwaukee, Luxembourg, and Bordeaux, France, I've been making a fool out of lots of folks just like you and helping white people dance. I am medicine and I am poison. I can help you up or make you fall. You have some of the best times you'll never remember with me, alcohol. And as goes on as he says, yea, since the day I left Milwaukee, Luxembourg, and Bordeaux, France, been making the bars lots of big money, helping white people dance. Yeah, I got you in trouble in high school because, now that was a ball. You say some of the best times you'll never remember with me, alcohol. And as you look at that song again, I realize it's humorous, written from that point of view. But it points out there's a lot of things people will do. And a lot of things that can lead to in their lives, that it can lead to the sin of fornication, of adultery, of people that normally would not commit those things. Maybe a married man that would not be unfaithful to his wife, but because of drinks, that he lets down his guard and he commits fornication, he commits adultery. Or maybe a young lady that would not let this guy here touch her, but that because she's been drinking, all of a sudden it's okay now. Talked about a few births, how many pregnancies have been caused because of people again drinking and not thinking about what they're doing. About the murders involved. People get angry, get in fights with each other as they're drinking. They would normally walk away from it. But because they are under the influence of alcohol, that they go out there and they strike back with vengeance. They hurt somebody. Or you could talk about the child abuse and the spousal abuse of people as they come home and they're having a good time on Friday night or after having a few drinks and then they get a little agitated and so they decide to slap somebody around at home. And just think about all kinds of other things that happen under the influence of alcohol. And just kind of give you some other numbers. As you think about alcohol, let's keep in mind, like we said, it is a drug. It is a drug. And as you look at this here, basically the effects of it, and let me just kind of give you some information I have here. It says a narcotic and not a stimulant. And that is a depressant. A lot of times people drink alcohol, think it's going to make them feel better, but really the tendency of the drug is to bring you down, to make you feel worse. It says an alcoholic beverages has ethyl alcohol. That's a habit-forming drug. The person can get dependent on it, have to have another drink very shortly. That the lupin found in the brewing process has the same chemical elements that marijuana does, except beer has heavier molecular composition. If you've been paying attention to the news here the last few weeks, you probably have heard that there are some people that are advocating the legalization of marijuana. And they're doing that, one thing, saying we can get the tax money off of it, so it'll help us with our tax situation. But also some of the argument they're making is that you have all these people being hurt by alcohol, and we don't have nearly the same effects with marijuana. And in one sense, they're right. As far as alcohol is a very devastating drug. It has hurt lots of people. Let me give you some numbers here about that. And that is the most widely used drug in the United States, alcohol. 71% of Americans say they drink some type of alcoholic beverage, so it's widespread as far as consumption. Per capita consumption of alcoholic beverages amount to 34.46 gallons of beer. So almost 35 gallons of beer per person, 3.4 gallons of wine, 2.53 gallons of distilled liquids for every man and woman in this country. That's a lot, so it's widely consumed. And more alcohol is consumed per year than milk or coffee. Just think about that. I was amazed when I first read that, because we have Starbucks, you have McDonald's selling coffee, you have all the milk in the grocery stores, but more alcohol is consumed than milk or coffee in this country. And so the results of that is that alcohol is involved in 50% of all driving fatalities. Half of the deaths in auto accidents are because or related to alcohol. Every 30 minutes, someone is killed in an alcohol-related traffic accident. Every 30 minutes, somebody dies out there on our roads because of alcohol. The 15 million Americans depend on alcohol. Now, let me say again, 15 million Americans are alcoholics. Of that number, 500,000 are between the ages of 9 to 12. 500,000 are younger than 13 years of age that are alcoholics in this country. 70% of all divorces are attributed to alcohol, and 75% of all crimes are attributed to alcohol. Those are devastating numbers when you stop thinking about it. Now, the problem I have with a person that's advocating marijuana, because they point out all the bad effects of alcohol, is that marijuana, if you let everybody be smoking it, you're going to have the same effects. You're going to have maybe even worse numbers. So I don't agree with the legalization of marijuana, but I do agree with the point of the argument they're making is that alcohol is a devastating drug. And that's true. But as we go back to Noah here, we have to keep in mind that Noah was drunk, and Noah was responsible for his drunkenness. See, a lot of times when people are drinking, they think that because they're drinking, it's okay. It's okay to let down their inhibitions. It's okay to do things or say things that they would not normally do. But they're still responsible for what they're doing. And for that reason, you have homes that are destroyed because the husband wakes up and realizes what he's done, or the wife does. And they may sound sorry, but they still hurt people. You still have hurt people even though you've been drunk. And because of that, a lot of times your reputation in the community is destroyed. Your reputation on your job, in the song we just read for you a few minutes ago about alcohol, I can get you fired from work. A lot of times in the office parties, that Christmas party and the 4th of July party where the guy gets drinking and has a real good time, and then after everybody sobers up, they realize what this person said or what they've been doing, and they decide they want to get rid of him. Or maybe because you come in to work and you're hungover, or you're still under the influence of the alcohol, and your boss says, we don't need you. We can't use you in this situation, so we're going to fire you. You're released from your job. And so alcohol can be very devastating. A number of years ago, Ann Landers had a column. I wish I had it. It was called Alcohol, the Great Remover. And it was written from a point of view of somebody who I think his parent had been alcoholic. And they just point out that alcohol removes all kinds of things out of your lives. It'll remove your spouse from your life. It can remove your children from your life. It'll remove your friends from your life. It can remove your job, your home, your furniture, your self-esteem. All those things alcohol can take out of your life. And so it can, again, be very devastating. Now, I know there are many people that will argue in favor of social drinking, favor of drinking alcohol as ways to loosen up, ways to relax, ways to have friends. It's just a way of socializing. And there's all kinds of arguments made in favor of it. But let's just turn to the Bible, some passages that deals with drinking. And the first passage I want to turn your attention to is over in Leviticus, the 10th chapter. And Leviticus 10th chapter, and I realize that we're dealing here with the Old Testament. But in Leviticus 10th chapter, the book of Leviticus in general is dealing with the priesthood, the tribe of Levi, as they are there to serve God. And so God puts some restrictions on them. Sometimes people think, as we read through the Bible, that everybody was drinking. My point here is that not everybody was drinking alcohol. In Leviticus 10th chapter, verse 9, it says, do not drink wine or intoxicating drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go to the tabernacle of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. And so God here, as he's laying out this principle to his priesthood, say, you're not going to approach me under the influence of alcohol. You're not going to be drinking it. And that's throughout all of your generations. And so you can't drink this. Now my point is, there we have the Old Testament principle as far as the priesthood of God. It has to be sober-minded at all times. And if you turn your Bibles over to 1 Peter, the 2nd chapter, and verse 9, and this is addressed to us as Christians. He said, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praise of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. He's not talking just to a group, to a few Christians. That all Christians are part of the holy nation. All Christians are part of the royal priesthood. All Christians are to be a holy group of people before God. And you see, that applies to me, that if I try to serve God, I cannot be involved in anything that's sinful. And I cannot be involved in drunkenness and drinking of alcohol. But let's turn over to another passage we found in our Bible. Let's turn over to the book of Proverbs, because Proverbs describes for us in very practical terms what happens when the person starts drinking. You see the commercial on television, and you would think that everybody just has a lot of fun, that there's no side effects or bad effects of alcohol. Everybody's just having a real good time. We turn to Proverbs 23rd chapter. And I want you to notice around verse 29, it starts describing some things. And we have basically four rhetorical questions. And those questions are, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Or who has complaints? Now, all four of those things are bad things to have in our lives. And he goes on to the next question, says, who has wounds without cause? In other words, you're hurt and you really don't know how you got them. You can't remember how you got that scrape or how you got the black eye. Or maybe you look out and your car's been banged up. You don't know how that happened. Who has those things in their life? And finally, who has redness of eyes? So there's really 6 questions here. And the answer to those 6 questions are all the same. He's saying, answer that by saying, those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. It can be enticing. Now, I will admit to you, I'm really not that tempted to alcohol. I don't find the smell of it that good. I see the effects it's had on people. I don't desire that. To me, it is a repulsive thing, the destruction is brought about by people. But I realize some people may look at it and it looks tempting, and may smell it, and it may to them smell good. And as he says, it swirls around smoothly. I just can't help but remember Beverly Hillbillies on television. We had Granny. Those of you older, those of you who have watched reruns may know what I'm talking about, but Granny was making moonshine. Now she didn't call it moonshine. She called it medicine, or for medicinal purposes, help her rheumatism, I think is what she called it. And she would have some, and she would take a drink of that, and she could hardly breathe afterwards, and then she would say, that's really smooth. Here's the case of the person, it swirls around smoothly. And the lancet bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. The effects is not immediate. A lot of times a person will be drinking and think, well, I don't feel anything, but it's a little while later they start feeling the effects of it. And it says, your eyes will see strange things. Your heart will utter perverse things. You start seeing things that are not there, or things start floating around, or you start imagining things being there that's really not there. And also, as you look there, you start saying things that you would not normally say. The heart here, Jesus says what comes out of the heart is what defiles a person. And so you start saying things you would not say. Yes, you would be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, they have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I do not feel it. When shall I wake that I may seek another drink? You think about being the person that sways back and forward. Their equilibrium is off because of the alcohol. Again, they may be hurt and not even realize it because of drinking. When I was at University of Kentucky, and they won a national championship one year while I was there, and I had a friend, we lifted some weights together. Believe it or not, at one time I lifted weights. And but anyway, he was a real dedicated type of weightlifter. He went out that night to celebrate with his friends. The next day, he couldn't lift weights. And the reason is his arms were scarred. He had decided that night to climb a telephone pole. Just put your arms around a telephone pole and start climbing up. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried that. I would not recommend it because there's splinters and there's simply all kinds of bad things. You get hurt, you get scrapes and cuts on your body, your arms. There's also the carousel on there that will burn your body. And he shook his head as if he should have known better, but again, he didn't hardly remember even doing it. And as though these are some of the effects of alcohol mentioned in this passage. But then also let's turn over to Proverbs, the 31st chapter, and notice around verse 4. Because earlier we had read where it said, do not even look at it. But in verse 4, Proverbs 31st chapter says, it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink. Why? Because they're people of authority. They're people that have responsibilities. It says, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the justice of all that afflicted. Give strong drink to him that is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. It only has limited purpose for only those who are in pain. We may say that person can use it, but otherwise forget about it, is what he's saying to us. Now let's turn to a couple of New Testament passages. And see what it says about the drinking of wine. In 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, we have in 1 Peter 4th chapter, verse 3, he's talking again to Christians, and he says, we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when they walked in lasciviousness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. We have three terms here used as far as what they're doing. Notice we have drunkenness, we have revelries, and we have drinking parties. Now let's look at it. The word drunkenness is referring to the person that just gets stone drunk. Now this is the person that can't hardly get off the floor. He's the person that put the lampshade on his head and think he's funny. He can be the person that, fortunately, most of the time they can't get out to their car because if they have ever got behind their car with a pair of keys, they'd be dangerous. They'd be trouble. As this person that kind of black out or pass out on the floor. And now the second term is the term of revelries. And this is the person not necessarily stone drunk, but this person has definitely earned the influence of the alcohol. Again, now they may put the lampshade on their head and they can dance around and they'll make all kinds of jokes and they'll do all kinds of things they won't probably remember. And this is a person that is dangerous because they probably can find their car and they probably can think they can drive it, and yet they're under the influence. And so this here is the revelries. They're not stone drunk, but they're definitely under the influence of alcohol. And then finally, you have drinking parties. And this here refers not to the person that's stone drunk, not the person that is halfway there, but this is the person that is socially drinking. Drinking just a little bit. And it said that person he won't probably put that lampshade on their head. They may be able to get behind the steering wheel, get behind the wheel of the car. They may be able to get home okay. Although it may be a little bit risky of them. I wouldn't want to be on the road with that person or in the car with that person. But that person has been drinking. They are under the influence of alcohol. You see, yes, there's drunkenness. And everybody can recognize and should recognize that it's wrong. But what about the first drink? Are you not also under the influence of alcohol just a little bit at the first drink? And then what about the second drink and third drink and fourth drink? Where did he cross that line of being drunk or being under the influence of alcohol? And so we see that he warns us about that, about the use of alcohol. And in fact, as you go on, I want to give you a little bit as far as the effects of alcohol. In low doses, it says it gives a relaxing effect, reduces tension, you kind of mellow out a little bit. It lowers your inhibitions. You stay and start saying things, doing things you wouldn't normally do, and it impairs concentration. You have trouble remembering exactly what you said earlier. Slows your reflexes. You're not as quick as you used to be. That's why driving and drinking is so dangerous, because you're not as fast with the steering wheel with your brakes as you would normally be. And it impairs your reaction time, reduces coordination. Okay, that's just low doses. Medium doses, that's when you start getting a slurred speech. That's when the person just they're trying to say the words, but they really can't get it out right, and they're kind of funny. If you hear somebody talk like that, you may think, well, that's funny. They get drowsy. They want to go to sleep, and that's partly because it is a depressant, as we said earlier. And it alters your emotions. The person may be laughing one minute and then crying the next minute. And then finally, high doses, you have vomiting, where a person's sick, start throwing up. I remember, again, at college, of some of the guys in the dorm, and I never understood the fun of this, but on Saturday night, coming back in about an hour or two later on, they were hugging the toilet bowl, throwing up their guts. I just never appealed to me. But it says also breathing difficulties. You have trouble breathing now. You may become unconscious, coma, and death is possible at high doses. And unfortunately, that has happened throughout, many times in this country every year, especially young people, but also older people as they get involved drinking, and somebody drink too much and kill themselves because of that. And so we look here and we find that with Noah, this is the first case of drunkenness really talked about in the Bible. Now, sometimes people will turn to and say, well, what about, and start making some arguments, such as the use of the word wine in the Bible. And let's understand that the word wine, there's a couple of different Greek words used as translated as word wine. One, it means basically the idea of alcoholic beverage. As obvious when you read about passages such as Proverbs 23rd chapter we read earlier, that there the use of the word wine is usually referring to alcoholic beverages. But there's another word that's translated as word wine in our Bibles that can mean either fermented or unfermented, and that is either alcoholic or non-alcoholic wine. And so it's an assumption a lot of people are making that every time they read the word wine, they're talking about alcoholic beverage, because there were a lot of wines they were drinking that were not alcoholic in nature. And also sometimes people say, well, everybody's drinking it. Oh, really? Really? Everybody's drinking? Let's just notice here in 1 Timothy, the 5th chapter, as Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says to him, verse 23, no longer drink only water, but use a little wine for your stomach's sake and your frequent infirmities. Now, if everybody is drinking it, why was Timothy not drinking it? This seems to necessarily imply that Timothy wasn't drinking any. And Paul is having to tell him it's okay to drink. And notice here, he says a little wine. Not a whole lot, a little, but also for a purpose, for your stomach's sake. And that is, it was going to help the stomach. It was for what we today would call for medical purposes. Now, again, if you're taking alcohol, if you have to cough syrup sometimes have alcohol in it, or if you're taking medicine that has alcohol because of a medical condition, a doctor tells you need to take that, I won't argue with you. But let's face it, 99.9% of the alcohol consumed today is not for medical purposes. It's because of social purposes, because of wanting to get drunk or wanting to drink alcohol. And so here was the case for a limited time, also that is a little, is all Timothy was supposed to take. And also somebody may say, well, doesn't over in 1 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, verse 8, talk about the idea of deacons and elders, and it mentions that deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not giving them much wine. And then over a little bit earlier, it talks about the elders and mentions them in verse 3 of 1 Timothy, the 3rd chapter, not giving them wine. Now, honestly, with the case with the elders, it's easy to see there that they're not to have any. And so somebody said, okay, they can't have any, but the deacons are to have some. Well, let's just think about that for a second. A passage that forbids excess does not permit anything short of it. In other words, is it okay to say, do not commit fornication, but it's okay to lead up to it. It's okay to start handling somebody in the wrong way. Start flirting around somebody you don't have a right to. Passages that talk about murder. Is okay as long as it don't murder. I can beat somebody up as long as I don't kill them. No, it's not okay. I'm to abstain from that which is sinful. And so that's what we're seeing in these passages. I just want to end this here with a few questions, and then the lesson be yours as far as this TV program. But if it's okay to be drinking alcohol, then why don't we just give it to our children? Why don't we give it to our children? If it's okay to drink alcohol, why don't we have it at a Bible study? Can you imagine the effect it would have if I have people over to my house, we're going to study the Bible, and while we're studying the Bible, let's bring out a keg of beer, and we'll just have some cold ones while we're studying. I don't think that works. I think you understand why it doesn't work. And so the Bible is pretty consistent as far as condemning drunkenness and the use of alcohol for simply recreational purposes, for somebody to be socially drinking. But as we said at the start of the lesson, the case is that man has always had a problem with sin. And that fortunately for us, as you look there in Romans the 3rd chapter, when Paul said all have sinned, fall short of the glory of God, and Paul in the 6th chapter of Romans said that the wages of sin is death, that he points out to us that thankfully, though, God sent his son Jesus to die for us to pay for the cost of our sins. The free gift of God is life in Christ Jesus, Romans 6 verse 23. And so we hope that is what you're searching for, is simply to please God and be able to go to heaven when this life's over with. We like to help you study the Bible and to understand what it is we need to do to become a child of God. And so if you need to talk with me, you want to study with me, either about this program in particular or about some other Bible subject, feel free to contact me. And I also like to invite you to come and be with us at the West Side Church of Christ. Our building is located at 4201 Bent Tree Drive, Owensboro, Kentucky, 42301. Again, that's 4201 Bent Tree Drive, Owensboro, Kentucky, 42301. And then also you can email me at wcoc@bellsouth.net. Again, that's wcoc@bellsouth.net. And we have a website, that's www.thewestsidechurch.us, thewestsidechurch.us. We'd like to invite you to come be with us. On Sundays, we have Bible classes begin at 9:30, runs to about 10:15. Then at 10:30, we have a time of worship, lasts about an hour to roughly 11:30. And then Sunday evening at 6 p.m., we have a worship service again. Wednesday nights at 7 p.m., we have Bible classes for all ages. And then finally, you can correspond with me. We just want to study the Bible with you. But I do appreciate you watching the program. Hope you have a good week.